Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Now, before I start this show today, I told the washer repair guy that I would give him a shout out because I had to have Dave here wait for me to call him, and I was trying to get a good deal on my washer fixing deal. So if anyone lives in the Lexington area here in Kentucky, you can call the appliance medic, and he will come take care of you, and I promise you he does a great job, and his prices are not way out of proportion to what needs to be fixed. So the appliance medic here in Lexington, Kentucky, I just really wanted to do that for the guy and keep my word to him. And today we have a very interesting story coming from New York. It seems that we've been getting reports from the New York area, not a huge area that you would think of being a Bigfoot area, but there are mountainous regions and woods and very squatchy type areas in New York, and this guy's going to give you another story of his experience and what he's been encountering there in New York. So this should be very interesting. His name is Dave, and he's from New York. So let's just go straight to him and let him give a brief bio on himself, and we'll go from there. So, hello, Dave. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you. Look, I can't do this without you all coming on. So, I appreciate you all more than you do me, I bet. But anyway, I think that you do have a very fascinating story, and I do believe also that people, when they think of New York, they think of a big city and concrete jungle kind of thing. And so if you would, give us a background on yourself, and then kind of explain the area in which that you have the land and stuff. Kind of give us an idea what it looks like and the feel of the flora and fauna and what have you.
All right. Well, very briefly, I retired at the age of 60. I'm 65 now, heading on 66. And my wife and I bought an old trawler. We lived aboard with our dogs. We traveled down the eastern seaboard from Albany, New York, down to Jacksonville, Florida. And we were visiting back in New York, in upstate New York, and we realized how much we missed the mountains. It's just absolutely beautiful in the mountains in upstate New York. So we bought 10 acres of land there to build on, and we rented a cabin about a mile down the road. Now, the Adirondack Park, most people, if you tell them New York State, they automatically think New York City. And upstate New York is night and day different from downstate New York. Upstate New York, the Adirondack Park is 6.1 million acres. It's the largest in the United States in the 48 states, the largest in the country. You could fit, I think, the next 4 largest federal parks inside the Adirondack Park. It's that big. It's got a population of about 100,000 people. It's not heavily populated. About half of the property is private land. About half is public land, and the public land is forever wild. It's very, very rural. If you like peace and solitude, you would love the Adirondack Park. The town that I live in is about 50 miles in a straight line from Whitehall. It's got 38,000 acres of land, and 550 people live there. The homes are few and far between. The winters can be brutal up there. The winters can be pretty tough, but it's home to the bear, the deer, the foxes, the coyotes. There's been reports of wolves, reports of cougars even in that area. Everything lives there. Now, when my wife and I bought our property around the cabin, the first year that we were there, now, I didn't, as I mentioned to you earlier, I wasn't a non-believer in Sasquatch. I was not even thinking about it kind of guy when it came to Sasquatch. I thought the whole topic was silly. I'm not into paranormal stuff. When I was a teenager, I'd read about UFOs like all the kids did, back then. And the first year I was there, the first thing I heard was some tree knocking. It was very close to the cabin. I've got dogs. At that time, I had 2 pit bulls and a pointer. And these dogs would chase everything and anything through the woods. And this knocking was very close to the cabin. I thought it sounded like a buck knocking the velvet off his horns. And my dogs didn't go in the woods to chase it. I couldn't figure out why. But I didn't pay much attention to it. Well, maybe they slept through it. I don't know. And then later on that year, I heard what sounded like a coyote outside the cabin. But my dogs, again, my two pit bulls were hiding in the cabin. They wouldn't leave. My pointer was outside barking at it, but she wouldn't go into the woods. So I grabbed my camera and I recorded it, about 3 minutes of it, and I put it on YouTube, stuck it on Facebook, and asked everybody, so what is this? What am I hearing here? And my hunting friends came back and said, well, it sounds like a coyote. It sounds like an owl. It sounds like a wolf. It sounds like whatever. So being a wise guy to them, they said, well, is it Bigfoot? Maybe it's Bigfoot. Not a thing that was cracking a joke. Well, following year, my wife and I were leaving. This is 2014 now. We're getting in the car and driving up a long, long driveway, and there's a well, a dug well, not too far from the driveway. That's covered. It's got a concrete casing, and it's covered with a chunk of particle board and blue tarp that's tied down with a rope. And Pamela says, the tarp is off the well. I go, what? So I stopped the car, and sure enough, the tarp was pulled completely off the well, and the rope was tossed off to one side, and the tarp was on the other. We had a long dry spell at that point. So I thought, well, maybe it had to be a bear. I mean, only a bear is going to be strong enough to do that. The rope wasn't that tight. It was broken in half. It was a pretty thick rope, probably about, I don't know, maybe 5/16 rope. So I was tying it back on, and Pamela was looking around at the ground. She's very observant. She doesn't miss anything. And she says, come on, go over here and take a look at this. And she was pointing at the ground. I said, well, what is it, a bear track? She said, no, come and look. So I walked over to look at it, and I could see human-like toes. It was very, very short. I said, well, it's too short and fat to be a human footprint. Besides, who's going to be here? She said, no, that's not the heel. The heel was back here. And it was this massive, huge footprint in the mud. It was probably about 18 to 20 inches long. And but I couldn't figure out. You can see the 5 toes very clearly, and there's a ridge behind the toes, and the heel was back quite a bit. But in the middle was another ridge of dirt. And I couldn't figure out what that was. So I took photos of it. I photographed everything. I'm an amateur photographer. Well, then about, I don't know, a month later, 2 weeks later, something, I don't remember exactly when. Again, it was really dry and dusty. I was driving our car down this dusty dirt road, and it kicked up a lot of dust on the back of the car. So I got to our cabin, and I was going to fetch the dogs to throw them in the back of the car, and there on the back of my car was a great big, huge, gigantic handprint. It was massive. The hand was cupped. The thumb is really, really long, and it's pointed. But at the base of the palm were these horizontal lines. It didn't look like corduroy. I mean, it was that thick. That didn't make any sense to me either. But at this point, I'm starting to think, like, holy mackerel, maybe these things are real. Maybe they actually exist. So I'm an ex-computer guy, and anything that interests me, I devour. I start reading everything I can on it. I listen to podcasts like yours, read all kinds of books, anything I can get my hands on. Joined Facebook groups, and just took it from there. Now, from 2014 to 2015, we found so much evidence of Sasquatch. I can go into all the detail later on, but these things are everywhere up there. I didn't realize how common. Well, I don't want to say they're common. They're not common like like coyotes are, but there's a lot of them up there. I can't say how many. They say there's probably one Sasquatch for every 10 bears. The bear population in New York is 10,000, which would mean that if that number is correct, there's probably about 1,000 Sasquatch up there. So I started posting this handprint around, asking people, well, has anybody have a Sasquatch handprint I can compare this to? Nobody did. Finally, a CSI from West Virginia contacted me on Facebook and said, send me high-resolution copies of that. I used the fingerprint expert for the CSI division they sent. So I did. And he came back a couple days later and said, well, I can't tell you it's a Sasquatch handprint because, quite honestly, nobody has a Sasquatch handprint, but I can tell you it's not a human print. So that was one step forward and, 2 steps back kind of thing. I was kind of stymied at that point. So it was about a year later, and I was listening to a podcast, and this noted researcher gave out his email address on the podcast. And I thought, man, this poor guy probably gets hammered with emails, but I emailed him anyway. And I said, I've got what I think might be a Sasquatch handprint. Do you have anything to compare it to? And he actually emailed me back right away, and he said, yeah, I do. Send me copies of it. So I did. And he sent them to some kind of forensic expert to make sure that it was legit. And then he compared to what he had. He said, yeah, I can confirm that's a Sasquatch handprint. So that just blew me away. So then I went back to, I told you about that coyote video. I went back to that. Now I'm getting kind of nervous. I'm thinking, man, I don't even know if these things are dangerous. You know, I mean, maybe it's going to eat me or something. So I went back to the video, and I compared it to everything I could find. Coyote vocalizations on the internet, and my dogs didn't react to any of it until I played my own. And then they went nuts. The pit bulls would hide, the pointer would bark. So I had belonged to a Native American site, and I posted it there. And I said, can you tell me what this is? Is this a coyote? And they came back right away. A whole bunch of them came back and said, that's not a coyote. That's a Sasquatch imitating a coyote to get your dog into the woods. So that's an abbreviated version of how I got involved in all this, and went from being a total skeptic, not even a skeptic, like I said, I just didn't give any thought, to being totally convinced that we're living in the middle of these things. They're all around us.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. So this handprint, was that kind of what pushed you over to the edge for believing that there really is something out there, when you had kind of more of an expert opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I found the footprint, that pretty much had me convinced that there was something to it. But I never didn't know what the other signs were. I didn't know what to look for. Right. But I was trying to figure out what else could possibly do it. You know, it wasn't a bear print. It's not going to be a neighbor. I don't have any. You know, it's not going to be somebody walking around barefoot, leaving footprints in the mud for me to maybe find. It just wouldn't happen that way.
Right.
But since that time, after all the reading that I did, my wife and I started looking for signs. We found tree bends everywhere, structures every place. The tree bends you can actually follow like a highway. We followed them right up the mountain to a lake on top, and they're one after the other. And if we left the line of tree bends and went elsewhere, there were no more tree bends. And we always look to see what's causing the tree bend. You know, is it pinned by something, pinned by a log, pinned by another tree? And they were. You know, if it's not obvious that it was pinned by something, I dismiss it. You know, it could be snow load.
Right.
So I'm an evidence skeptic. I'm not a Sasquatch skeptic. I'm a total knower when it comes to Sasquatch. But when it comes to evidence, I've got to have some kind of solid proof that nothing but a Sasquatch could do it. You know, not even a bear. You know, if I see some tree bark scraped off a tree, well, a bear can do that. A porcupine can do that.
Right.
We have those too.
So
that's pretty much.
So have you found that these tree bends are basically marking their kind of highways, so to speak?
That's my opinion of what they are, because they do go in I mean, you can follow the trail. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're some kind of a indicator for other Sasquatch to follow. Right. I don't know what else they could possibly be. I don't know what they could be used for, other than that.
Right. I've had another guy on, and he talks about those markers, and he has come up with opinions on what a leaner, like a tree bend leaning toward a certain area or leaning away from an area would mean. Like if there's coming out of the woods, if there's a school, it would be leaning back towards the woods, like don't go there. If it was leaning toward, or you know what I'm saying, he figured out the direction of the tree bends and the leaning stuff. And so you're talking about trees that are bent over and not necessarily leaning.
Right, exactly.
Right.
We find a number of X structures around. And what we think, again, this is just our opinion on this, but what we think that means is that there's human activity around. It's a warning to other Sasquatch that, to be on the lookout for humans. So we'll find them, well, there's no hiking trails. We'll find them like close to highways and like that, or close to somebody's house. We'll see a big X that seems to indicate, don't go over here.
Right. Yeah. So you did mention your wife having an encounter. Can you tell us about that, and then we'll go into your, and if you've seen and stuff like that. Let's just kind of talk about the visual encounters that you know of, that you've had, or your wife's had, or people you know in that area.
Well, the first, I may have seen one. This is, I kicked myself over this one. I was working on a property. I was building stone walls. A hot, sunny day. I found the Sasquatch nest on a property along a game trail. It's all these trees bent over with old logs piled on top of them. And it's big enough to actually crawl inside. My dogs wouldn't go in there. They could probably smell something. I don't know. They wouldn't go in there. So I was sitting on the deck that I had built, and I popped open a beer, and I was looking down the game trail, and I saw the silhouette of the Sasquatch standing in the wood line in the shadows. And I laughed. I said, "You're losing it now. I mean, you're totally losing it." And sitting next to me was my Nikon camera, nice camera, with a 300 millimeter zoom lens. I didn't pick it up and take a picture. So I could look at it and say, "Yeah, there's nothing, just shadows." I looked away for just a minute. I looked towards our garden. I looked back, and it was gone. So it could be a trick of light, but I only looked away for a minute. It didn't look away for very long. My wife's sighting was a sighting. In 2015, we came back from Florida in May, and she came to the cabin, dropped the cats off. We spent that night in the RV. The next day, we came back, and there were trees that were all broken next to the door of the cabin. We think that the one Sasquatch likes my wife a lot and was letting her know that it's still there, because the trees weren't broken like that the night before. Well, the next night, it's right at dawn, and she goes out with me behind my dog's barking. She goes out to let the dogs out, and it's just barely getting light out. And she was walking around. She looked at the car, and there was more handprints on the car. So she came in to get me 5:30 in the morning. She's waking me up. She says, David, there's handprints on the car. I'm not a morning person. So I said, well, take my camera, go take pictures of it. So she grabbed my camera, and she ran to take pictures of the car. And while she's doing that, she heard her Sasquatch run behind her. A bipedal, boom, 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 boom. Wow. And she looked around, it was gone. She came running in and says, David, it's outside. So then I said, all right. So I get up, I'm putting my pants on, I'm getting ready to go out. She's standing by the back door of the cabin looking out. All of a sudden, her mouth drops, and she said, I saw it. It was standing behind a cluster of small pine trees. Only she couldn't tell what it was because it didn't move. It stood absolutely still, and she only realized what it was when it ducked. It moved down and ran away. And then she knew that she was staring right at the Sasquatch, but didn't know it at the time until it was gone. She saw it very, very briefly, and we think it's the only sighting she had ever, which I may have seen one, maybe I didn't. Her sighting lasted maybe 3 seconds, and we're pretty convinced that you're only going to see one if it wants you to.
Right.
And I think it was the Sasquatch's way of saying to my wife, I'm here, I'm back, and that was it. We never saw it again. I mean, we interacted with it. I can tell you some of the weird interactions that we've had. But where it was standing, I went around over there. First I yelled at it for getting me up at 5:30 in the morning. I wasn't too pleased. You can see where the grass is all matted down, where it stood. Yeah. And it had to be about 8 feet tall, because the pine trees are about 6 feet tall that it was standing behind, and you could see it from about the shoulders up. So it was a pretty good size one. It was pretty big.
Right. You know, when they're standing still in the woods, they're just so perfectly blended. I try to tell people this, that you can walk right by them and not see them. So unless you're aware and you're looking around for them, you can encounter them quite regular and not know it if they're in the area. It's amazing.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't think I'm not into any of the weird stuff. I don't think they disappear. I don't think they cloak. I don't think they turn into balls of light and fly away. I just think they stand still. Yeah. You know, that's how small animals that try to hide. Yeah. You know, as a hunter, you hunt a rabbit, it'll run for about 50 yards and stop and not move a muscle and stay perfectly still. Deer do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's all Sasquatch does. It'll stand behind a tree. It's bigger, it's wider than the tree, but it doesn't move. It just stands perfectly still, and you're just not going to see it.
Yeah, I've been deer hunting before and been sitting there in my tree stand and getting discouraged and thinking, well, I guess I'm not even going to ever see a deer, and just sitting there gawking, looking straight ahead, and all of a sudden I realize there's a deer. How long has it been standing there? The animals with fur or hair and those tannish earth tone colors, they're just so good at hiding by standing perfectly still. Now there's a encounter that I covered here not too long ago, maybe a week or so ago, of another guy who had an encounter in New York, and he ended up coming face to face within 2 feet of this thing. He was looking down, closing his eyes because he was so scared, and he opened his eyes and he was looking at its feet. So he raised his head up, and he was scared to look at it in the face because he thought that it would be a kind of an aggressive thing. He was trying to really come off as submissive so that it didn't trigger it, to kill him, because it was so terrifying to be standing that close to something that huge. He ended up looking straight ahead, and he was looking into its chest, and then he barely looked up, and he said he kind of shrugged his shoulders forward and tried to look sheepish, like, I'm sorry, because he threw a rock at this thing. He didn't know it was a Bigfoot at first. It was squatted. It was laying down in the road looking at this farm. It was stalking this farm, basically. But one thing he said that really stood out to me was, he said this thing was so perfectly still that really stood out to him, how still it was. And it was just staring, and his eyes would kind of look him up and down. The only thing moving was his eyes. And so that made me really start thinking about their abilities to stay hidden from us is their perfect camouflage, and their ability to know when to be still. And in the times when you see them and they're rocking, they're trying to get your attention because they are saying something to you by doing this rocking, because eyes notice motion. Motion is very visible when something standing still is almost hidden automatically if it has any type of camouflage ability. But anyway, so you know that they stand still, and you rationalize, is that what I think it is? And you talk yourself out of seeing it sometimes. And it sounds like to me you both have seen one. You just didn't acknowledge that that's what it was. But
in my case, I may have seen one. In my wife's case, she did. She's a little bit upset with herself. She could have looked at it and looked at its features, looked at its face, but she just didn't know what she was looking at until it moved. Then it was gone. All she knows is it was the shape of a Sasquatch, and it was 8 feet tall. We figure 8 feet tall. It was big.
Yeah. But, well, and that kind of sounds like what happened with you, too.
I'm sorry?
I mean, that sounds like what happened to you. You look off for a second, and then that is gone. But that's for you to determine whether or not. I mean, it's good that you're cautious about saying, this is what that's respectable for sure. But if you want to, let's talk about the strange encounters now.
Strange encounters.
The activity.
Some people wanted me to. They said, put up trail cameras, take pictures of it. So I put up a trail camera, and of course, all activity stopped immediately. Nothing. We had no footprints. We had no handprints. We had nothing. I took the trail cameras down, and within a few weeks, activity started back up again. But what we've had is we think this one particular Sasquatch took a real liking to my wife. Not so much to me, but to her, liked a lot. There's a stump. We call this semi-famous researcher up. This guy's done some TV shows and like that, and he lived not too far away. And he wanted to know if he'd come up and look around. So we said, yeah, sure, come on up. So he did, and we showed him what we had. We showed him the tree bends and the structures and things. We showed him some tree twists that we found, and he walked around, he looked at everything, didn't say much. And then he looked at the back of the cabin, and it's all windows there. It faces south, and it's just a window wall. And the woods are about, I don't know, maybe 50, 75 feet away. He looked at it and he laughed. He said, you know what you got here? I said, I don't know what. He said, you got Sasquatch TV. I can tell you now, it stands right in the wood line and watches you guys. So that kind of freaked me out. So I said, so you think that we've got Sasquatch here, Steve? He said, you could have your own HBO special here. So he actually came up with a whole expedition with the guys, and he went to our property and camped out, and they had some rocks thrown at him, and Steve said he saw something on his night vision camera, but that was about it, you know. But as far as interacting goes, somebody said to me, well, try a gifting stump. Now, at this point, I thought that Sasquatches were apes and nothing more than apes. Some kind of weird, undiscovered North American ape that you should be afraid of. And that's how I regarded it. But somebody said, well, try a gifting stump. And I said, what the heck's a gifting stump? And so you pick a stump that you think the Sasquatch hangs out in, and you leave him things. I said, well, that sounds stupid, but I told my wife, I told Pam about it, and she went out. She's, like I said, she's the observant one. I'm not. You know, I could have a 10-foot-tall Sasquatch stand in front of me on a polo stick, and I wouldn't see it. But she went out, and she found the stump, and it was covered in pine nuts. You know, the ground was all beat down around it. She thinks that that's where the Sasquatch was standing, watching us at night. So she, what'd she leave? She left it. She has a dragonfly earring, and she left it out there, and it totally ignored that. So then she thought she'd leave it an apple half, or two halves. She took an apple, cut it in half, and put them on this stump. She went out the next day, and she comes running into the cabin all excited. She said, you won't believe this. I said, what? And she said, well, one of the apple halves is gone. I said, one is gone? Well, that could be a squirrel. I need to take that. She said, no. The other apple half was put over to my side of the stump towards the cabin, and my earrings put on top of it. So that kind of blew me away. I thought, well, it was a squirrel or an animal, but taking both halves and one put a dragonfly earring on top of it. So that's when the weird the weird interacting stuff started. We came back from our property one day to the cabin, and in the vestibule between the outside door and the inside door, it had placed tiger lilies. I mean, nobody else is going to come to this. They can't even find the cabin unless you know exactly where it is. Put tiger lilies inside the vestibule, which I have no idea how else they could possibly get there. It was leaving these weird. This is going to sound pretty strange. You might hang up on me here, but we found these weird glyphs, these arrangement of sticks around the cabin. And what I was finding over and over and over again was shaped like a letter A. And I said, gee, you know, these things just fall like that, but these look like they were placed like that. Then one day we found one right outside the window wall of the cabin, and it was a large A shape. So, being the kind of guy that I am, at this point I was reading about Sasquatch, and a lot of people thought that they might be derived from Gigantopithecus blacki, which is a 10-foot-tall ape from Asia, and maybe came over the land bridge. So I got thinking about it, well, if it came from Asia, maybe it's some kind of communication, some kind of symbol. So I Googled Chinese symbols, and I found the letter A. And what the letter means is big man. So I told Pam about it, and she said, don't you tell anybody that. They're going to think you're crazy. I said, well, maybe I am, but, I mean, look at this. And so I said, go make a letter A on your stump. So she went to her stump. She made her letter A with some sticks. The next day, she went out and she checked it. She came back in. She's all excited. She said, it added a stick. I said, what do you mean? And she showed me. It was like letter A, and there's a small stick across the lower left leg. So I looked that up on my Chinese chart, and it means great big man. I thought, no, this can't be. This is impossible. So I started asking people on Facebook and like that, other researchers, and said, send me pictures of any glyphs that you got, anything that looks like it was possibly made. And they did. I've been able to translate about half of them off this Chinese chart that I got. Some of them I can't. Some of them I have no idea what it means. But I translated one that, well, she finally, Pam won't believe me. She said, find me the glyph for friend. So I did. The Chinese symbol for friend looks like a lowercase f with an X below the lower horizontal line. So she just chewed out to her stump, and she made the letter F. And the next morning, she came back in, went and checked it, and she said, replaced some of the sticks. I said, with what? She said, well, it still looks like the same glyph, but it took...
hold on for a second. Hold on. Make sure you're telling some very interesting stuff. Just make sure you're talking into the microphone because you're real clear at times, and then you're not. So,
I apologize for that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. Go ahead with the glyph stuff. That's very interesting.
All right. Well, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
All right. The lower horizontal line is replaced, a large stick with a small one, and the X was replaced, larger sticks with smaller ones. So I think basically what it did was it corrected her spelling. It said, no, that's not quite right. This is how you make the letter F. So that's where it gets pretty weird. I'm just guessing at this stuff. You know, it could be all coincidence. I have no idea exactly what's going on here. But I've got a number of people around the country that are experimenting for me, trying to duplicate what I found, do the same thing that I've been able to do with ours. At this point, I'm really convinced that the Sasquatch that we have is no ape. It's nothing like a mountain gorilla. Our local Iroquois, of course, the word Adirondack means they eat bark, or land of the bark eaters. And I was always told that the Iroquois, the Mohawk, were referring to the Abenaki as a kind of a derogatory term. Now, I'm not so sure. You know, I think it might be referring to the Sasquatch. And I did some reading about the Iroquois, and the Iroquois claimed that these are people, not an ape, and they traded with them. They would trade salt for pelts, and they couldn't trade with them directly. They would leave salt in a certain spot, and they'd come back a few days later, the salt would be gone, and there'd be pelts in its place. So it's like a gifting stump. I think this is just something cultural that Sasquatch seem to do. They share. I went up by my wife's car one day, and there was half a squirrel there. Only half, the back half. And it was deboned, and the guts were removed. It's like it left my wife a half a squirrel. Like, this is for you. You left me an apple. Here's a squirrel. It seems bizarre, but
no.
You know, the advantage that we've got is that we live with them. You know, I guess you call it habituation. You know, we weren't weekend warriors. I mean, those guys, my hat's off to them for doing what they do. But we didn't have to go looking for stuff. You know, we did go for hikes and look for tree bends and like that, but this stuff came to us. Right. You know, it would knock on our cabin walls at night, knock on the windows at night to get a reaction. If we weren't doing anything, you know, it would come and knock on stuff. Right. It's just totally bizarre. And, you know, if somebody told me 3 years ago that I'd be having these kind of experiences, talking to a guy like you on the phone about it, I would have said they're insane. You know, there's no such thing as Sasquatch. But, like I said, now I'm convinced that at least, I'm not saying that there aren't ape-like Sasquatch. There may very well be. There's too many people, I think, that report seeing aggressive behavior from Sasquatch, things like bluff charges and like that. Right. But ours are not. And they're not dangerous. You know, I take star photos at night. I'm totally night blind. I take star photos at night so I can see what I'm missing. And I heard it run behind me. But I didn't get nervous. I didn't get scared because I knew that if it wanted to hurt me, it would have done so long, long ago. So right. It didn't make me nervous.
Right.
The only I did get nervous was 4:30 in the morning. Our pointer had to go out. Woke me up. So I let it out, and it's totally pitch black anyway, but there's no light pollution from anything. And I can't see anyhow. Well, she started barking like she did at that coyote call. She was barking and barking and barking. I thought, this is going to be trouble because she won't come to me. She'll listen to Pam, but she won't answer to me. So I grabbed the flashlight, put on my shoes, and went out, and she was way up the driveway, barking and barking and barking. So I called her, and she turned her head. I could see the eye shine. It reflected off her eyes. And she came running right to me. I thought, wow, she never does that. She went running right by me and ran into the cabin. She was gone. So I'm standing there, and I'm shining the flashlight around, trying to see what she was barking at, and I smelled it. I stopped shining the flashlight. I turned the flashlight off. I could smell it really, really strong. It was pungent. It was an awful smell. I turned right around and walked back into the cabin. So I'd never smelled our Sasquatch before. And I thought, well, this might not be ours. This might be a different one. So they walked right by the cabin. There's 2 trails on each side of the cabin. We've heard them walking up and down these trails. I thought, well, this might be a different one. This one might not be friendly. So I went right back in the cabin. That was the end of it. That's the only time I've been nervous.
Right. Yeah. Well, it seems like to me that sometimes the aggressive encounters are when someone has went into their territory, and they have to live somewhere with their young, So if you're going into their area and they have their little ones and things like that, I think that just like people would do, if it's a threat, they're going to get aggressive, and that's what it kind of seems like. After collecting so many of these stories, it seems like the aggression stuff happens when you encroach on where they seem to be living. And at times, there's differences when people come across where the Bigfoot seem to live and where they seem to hunt. And a lot of times when you come across the areas they're hunting, they can get upset if you interrupt their hunt. And they're just like people. Sometimes people snap and get mad, and they are a type of human, it seems to me too. And whether you go with the theory that they are the Nephilim, which would make it a type of human, or at least a hybrid human and something else, or if you think that they're just some type of prehistoric human, this has a different evolution line. There's people have different theories, but I think across the board, more and more people are believing that they are a type of human, and whether or not you have the Nephilim or and when I say Nephilim, I'm not saying it's a demon. And I have some subscribers that are confusing that. A Nephilim was a very physical creature who lives on the planet, and they eat and they hunt, and that Israel pursued the Nephilim a lot, not the Sasquatch type, and they killed them a lot. They hunted them, and they were very physical beings. They had wars with them, and and the Anunnaki that you mentioned earlier. If you look into the word giant, they were giants. The Nephilim happened to be giants, maybe not every case, but one of the words that the tribe of Moab used was imams, and the word imams was Anoki, and I do believe that was in the Sumerian area to where the Anunnaki stories come from. So, and the word Anoki actually meant terror because of the terror they caused their worshippers. So they were also worshipped as gods. And but anyway, I'm just trying to say that the Nephilim theory, some people get that confused, and with that I'm saying that they are a demon, because a demon is a disembodied spirit that can manifest in all kinds of different shapes and forms, but they're not necessarily physical. At that point, a demon is a disembodied. An angelic being has a body. The glory is different according to Apostle Paul, kind of thing. But a Nephilim is a hybrid between an angelic and a human, so they are very physical, earthbound beings. And until they get killed or they die, they're not disembodied. And then some people say, according to like the Book of Enoch, that they become demons at that point when they're disembodied. But that was the pre-flood Nephilim. But anyway, that's just different theories. But no matter what, I don't know for sure about none of it. I'm just making guesses, same as anyone. But it does seem that they're humanoid, and they have very human-like behavior. So they're a type of human of some type, and so the theories are just theories at this point until we can prove it, and it doesn't seem like we've made much progress on proving for sure what they are. So
well, everything's a theory. The only way to prove anything would be to have a body, and I am definitely anti-kill, and I just can't see the need to prove anything to anybody. And I really do believe that they're not human, maybe, but they're very human-like. I've read, as I'm sure you have, many reports of people that have a Sasquatch in their sights with a rubber rifle, and they can't pull the trigger. Right. They look too human-like.
Yeah.
So I would tend to agree with that. I'll tell you a little funny story. So I do research everything. I read about it, but there's an Iroquois museum in House Cave, New York, not too far from us. We decided to go visit it and check it out. And there was a Mohawk couple that were working there, a man and a woman. So, being who I am, I walked up to the guy and I said, do you have any stories of Sasquatch? The guy looked at me and smiled and shrugged his shoulders. But Pam was there, and Pam and the fellow's wife got in this animated conversation about Sasquatch. And Pam told the lady what was happening, and she said, you're very fortunate because it seems like it likes you. She said, so Pam said, what do I do about my dogs? I'm afraid it's going to eat my dog. This when this whole thing first started. And the woman said, well, just ask it not to. And I said, what? Pam's telling me this in the car later on. I said, ask it not to? What kind of dopey thing is that? So Pam did. We went back, and in English, of course, Pam said, these are my pets. I love my pets. Don't eat my dogs or my cats. In 3 years, we never had a problem. We lost one kitten that could have been to a hawk. But in that entire time, we never had to worry about the animals. And it seems like our dogs seem to accept it. When Pam was out taking a picture of the handprint on the back of the car and heard it run behind her, she had her dog with her. And the dog didn't bark. The dog didn't run away. This dog seemed like, oh, God, this is like another person around, So I'm really tending to think that my thinking has evolved so far on this one that at least the ones that we have around us are very human-like. Have to be.
Yeah. It seems, different areas. It seems like Mississippi has a lot of aggressive ones there, and I've gotten several stories where they kill the dogs, but I think it's more of a need to kind of thing that the dogs are giving them away.
Well, that's, especially if the dogs are chasing them through. Our dogs wouldn't go after them. I mean, when this all first came down, our pit bulls, and you just heard them barking a minute ago, they barked at everything. They wouldn't bark, they wouldn't leave the cabin. It was only the pointer, the hunting dog, that would do that. And the pointer's the kind of dog, because where we live, we just let her go, and we won't see her for hours at a time. So she's been captured on game cameras at a hunting camp a mile down the road. She just ranges all through the woods. When we heard that coyote noise, she wouldn't go in the woods at all. And these dogs, we first moved there, we had a bear in the backyard. They were going crazy. They wanted to get out and get the bear, Right. They don't seem to be afraid of anything, but they were afraid of the Sasquatch, whatever it was, right from the start. They seemed to sense what it was and that it wasn't good.
Right. Yeah. The dogs seem to, a lot of times steer clear. Whatever the reason is, I'm not for sure, but they don't sure seem to steer clear of them when they're around.
Well, I tell people that, people that I talk to on Facebook, and I say, watch your dogs. If your dogs don't want anything to do with it, you don't either. Just be very, very careful. Most dogs will. They'll chase off after any kind of game. Our dogs chase off after coyotes and like that. When the Sasquatch are around, though, we don't have any of that stuff. So we first moved to the cabin in 2013. We had a big bear in the backyard eating our birdseed. When the Sasquatch showed up, we never saw the bear again. We never heard coyotes again. No fox, no predators of any type. They seem to stay well away from the Sasquatch.
Right. So do you still have activity around your place now?
Well, we're in Florida right now, and I've got some health issues going on. I got a rotator cuff surgery, and I probably can't get back there this year. But Pamela just went back, and she grabbed her car and drove her car back, and she said that she would check out her gifting stump. And the gifting stump, it's an old stump that was cut down, and there was a shard of wood that was sticking up on it. I've actually got a photo of this where it left her a leaf with a moth attached to it, jammed in the shard. The shard was broken off. Like the Sasquatch got mad that she had left, and was letting her know that it wasn't happy. It broke this shard off. And she saw that, and she saw a couple of new tree bands, but that was about it. She was only home for a few days, so she didn't have a chance to look around much. They did go hiking up the mountain on one day. They went up with a couple of friends, and Pam said the tree band is still going up the mountain, but they're right there.
Now, so how often did you feed these things?
I'm sorry, how often what?
How often did you give food to them?
We didn't feed them really as a rule. I don't think it's a good idea. We never gave them anything like peanut butter or candy bars. Pam gave them the apple one time. She may have given them something else, but it's only things that they would find naturally anyway. Yeah. Things that pick themselves. I think she left it some berries one time. Oh, she did. She left it some blueberries.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the first morning when she checked it, the berries were kind of mushed down, like somebody poked it with a finger, like wasn't really sure what they were. The next day she went and she checked and they were gone. Now, it could have been another animal ate the berries. I don't know. But it was, again, on her stump, so who knows?
Yeah.
Hard to tell.
Well, the only reason I ask is because, you know, some people say if you start feeding them, when you stop feeding them, it'll end up being a problem. But it sounds like you weren't feeding them any kind of consistent kind of deal anyway. So
no, what was that? I told you that it left Pam a half a squirrel. Like it was paying the favor back. You left me an apple. Here's a squirrel. Enjoy it.
Yeah,
We didn't eat it, but
that's interesting.
Didn't eat it.
He was feeding. They were feeding you.
Property, which was kind of strange. I tractor on my property, and the tractor's got chains. The chains are held on with bungee cords. And I was at a property last year, and I found some bungee cords just laying on the ground. I thought, well, that's odd. And I went to my tractor. I thought maybe something fell off, but my bungee cords are still there. So I couldn't figure out where these came from. I do have one neighbor. My father-in-law lives next door, but he's not the kind of guy that's going to walk around and leave bungee cords laying around. Later on, I found a bunch of washers and hose clamps and other things like that were left. I have a tractor trailer that I use for storage and was sitting on the steps there. I took a picture of it and I put it on one of my Facebook groups and I said, I mean, what is this? You know, how come I've got these washers laying here? It's like the Sasquatch gave me washers. And somebody came back and said, did you notice that they're all round? Everything that it left you is round. Well, yeah, so I found all these washers and like that on the steps of this trailer. And I put it on Facebook. And like I said, I'm a computer guy. I'm a fact-based guy. I'm not good at interpreting things. That's Pam's job. But a woman on this Facebook group said, well, Cheryl said everything is round. And then it clicked. I thought, well, I left it, put a golf ball on a beard. I can't tell you why. I thought if there were apes, maybe it would take it and play with it. I don't know. So I left it, and maybe it never did touch that, by the way. It just left it right where it was for a year. So maybe it thinks I like round things. It was trying to give me round things. So that's what it did. Yeah, one more interesting story on our property was Pam had a neighbor's horse over there, and she was trimming its mane. Its mane was kind of long. She trimmed it, and she left all the horse's mane just laying on the ground. She found all the mice and the birds will use it for nesting material like that. And sure enough, within a week or so, all of it was gone. Well, the following year, where Pam always parks her car on her property when she's over there, had me walking by, and there was some horse's mane there. And it was all tied up like a bow. So I showed it to Pamela. I said, what is this? And she said, well, that's the horse's mane, the horse that I trimmed last year. That's the mane. And it was all just tied up. I've got a picture of that on Facebook, too. It's also, I wrote a book about it. It's also in the book. But it's just bizarre. I don't know why. I've read a number of reports about Sasquatch wanting to braid horses' manes, and I could never understand that, never figure that out. But they seem to like it. I don't know why. Maybe they play with it. I don't know.
Well, do you have horses up there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife's got a horse. She's got a Morgan.
Okay.
And this is a friend's horse. The friend's building a barn, so the friend's horse is at my father-in-law's property, which is next door to ours. And
right.
she just had Katie over there to trim the horse's mane one day.
Well,
like I just left it there.
Yeah,
we've had other things happen. You know, we used to barbecue over there. We got a grill, and Pamela grilled hamburgers one day. She had the hamburger in a Ziploc bag. Well, the next day I went over, and I found the Ziploc bag on the ground. I found half the Ziploc bag. It was bitten in half. You could see the teeth marks plain as day. The other half was gone. I don't know if it ate it, and it was pulled out of the garbage. It wasn't like a bear. A bear would tip over the whole garbage can and root through the whole thing. This was just picked up out the garbage. Half the bag was gone. The other half was left there with, all the teeth marks in it. Strange, very strange.
Yeah. Well, the horse mane thing. Some people think that the Bigfoot is braiding their horse's mane. That's not what they're doing at all. And there's a lot of people don't. The braids that they're saying that the Sasquatch is doing is not really braids. It's almost tangles, and it is tangled at the width of their hand because they grab a hold of the mane and they're twisting it to hold the horses down. And this is only with the mares. If you notice that people are saying when their horses, if they say that they had their horses' manes braided, it's never going to be a male horse. It's always a female horse. And what the Sasquatch do is they double team. They'll have one Sasquatch that will grab a hold of the mane, because this has been seen done, okay? And anyway, it'll twist its fingers up in the mane. It'll hold the horses down, because if you hold the horse's head down, it can't buck. If you notice how a horse will buck, it uses its whole body, and it kind of throws the momentum down towards the rear. And basically, in some of these cases, not every time you see, sometimes they're called witches' knots and things like that in the manes, and it's not Sasquatch at all. But there's a lot of times there will be scratches or handprints at the rear of the horse, and these the alpha males control the packs, and these Bigfoot packs basically, and they usually get all the females. So there will be some of the male Sasquatch that will be frustrated, and they go and they sometimes go after these female horses. They do it to cows too, and it's a very taboo subject that people don't want to acknowledge. But if you wanted more information on that, you can go to Outlaw Radio Bigfoot Show, and he recently did a show on this, 2 shows. Or actually 3, because he ended up having a lady come on that bred horses and was having this problem. But it's without saying it, it happens to the mares. Just put it that way. And but it's very interesting. You ought to go hear what Kumbo talks about, and how he discovered this was happening. Is that he had horses, and he was noticing this on the horses, and they gave a corner of their property to a family to set up and live there. And this guy came to them, and he had caught these Sasquatch doing that, and he finally thought, that's what's happening, because he was thinking, who in the heck is braiding my horse's manes? And but they weren't like really good braids. They were almost twists, so they kind of look like braids. And I would suggest go checking that out on Outlaw Radio.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. They explain it very well, and not everybody's going to agree with it, but I'm telling you that if you listen to it, it'll make a lot of sense. So they did a fantastic job on talking about that. Well,
yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yes, it is, but it was very, very taboo for sure, and But you'll see the episode. It will say taboo subjects of Bigfoot, and then there's a 2-part series, and then there's a lady that comes on a little bit later show, a few episodes later, who had a ranch, who was having these problems on her ranch with her horses in Florida, and when she found out what was going on, it was just shocking to her. But once he told her what all he knew that she would find as evidence, it was in fact exactly what she was finding. So very, very interesting. They're not. Matter of fact, Kumbo said he said that these people would say, "Well, the Sasquatch was braiding my horse's hair," and he said, "Well, I bet the horse didn't appreciate it."
Well, yeah, I often wonder. Oftentimes we'd see our Cam's horse would be in the pasture by himself. He'd just be standing, staring at the woods. He'd be absolutely motionless, just staring at the woods.
Yes.
And Cam would call him. He wouldn't turn his head. He wouldn't look. He'd just be staring off into the woods. And I thought, well, if the Sasquatch is out there, he doesn't seem to be afraid of it. So maybe it is human-like. He just looks at it as being another person, a hairy person, but a person. And it's never hurt him, obviously, or he'd be afraid of it. But one time, Katie did break out of the electric fence, and she took off. So I don't know if Sasquatch was after Katie, like our fence horse, the mare, or not. But that's the only time that fence has ever been broken down is when Katie was there, and she took off one time. So
Yeah.
maybe what you're saying makes sense. Maybe it all adds up.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of be aware and look for those little signs. Do they ever steal your feed? If feed come up?
No, not that I'm aware of. Of course, in New York, they mostly just graze. Pam does have pellets, but the pellets are kept up by the house in a garbage can. And not that a Sasquatch wouldn't go up there, but we've never lost feed that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah. After you watch his show.
Plenty of food. I mean, the problem down here in Florida, you mentioned the lady at the horse farm in Florida, is the food supply down here is awful. The hay is terrible, and it's really sandy around the Ocala area where we are now. It's very, very sandy, and there's no grass to speak of. So it wouldn't surprise me if a Sasquatch or a skunk ape had to look for alternative food sources. For New York, it's just not necessary. There's so much that they could eat up there. Because they don't have to do that.
Yeah. And, I think some of those, the sweet feed and stuff like that they a lot of times get into, it just, an extra little bonus is something that they like. And, but if you have horses, there's signs to look for if there's something going on, and I don't think it's some widespread all the time if you've got horses. But it does, happen, and there's been evidence of it happening, that there's something going on with the male Sasquatch, with these mares and cows, and then there's other cases too that not even just horses and cows, but anyway, you'll find that very interesting. And so anyway, is there any more you would like to say before we wrap this up? And
well, not really. Only that I'm convinced now that Sasquatches are real. I used to think anybody that said that they saw a Sasquatch was crazy or drunk or both. I never thought that the possibility they could be real would happen. And then I thought, when I first saw the footprint, I thought, well, these can't be real. I mean, if they did exist, they're going to be in the Pacific Northwest. They don't live here. They only live out in the West.
Right.
So, and now I'm convinced that, and from what I've read, all the research that I've done, is that they're everywhere. I mean, every place you've got dense forest, you've got water, and you've got game, you can have Sasquatch there.
Yeah.
And they're the young ones anyway. The juvenile that we had, they seem to like people. They like to watch people. That one famous researcher guy I told you about, Steve, and he came. Fire, made a beer. They were happy with that, and he was watching out for him with his night vision equipment.
Yeah.
And the only time they had stones thrown at them, Pam was with them when the stones were thrown at them. They were walking towards the woods, and it's possible that maybe there was some young Sasquatch up there. That was a warning to stay away. Don't go up there.
Yeah.
But if they wanted to hurt anybody, they certainly could have done it many, many times. So at this point, I'm not afraid of Sasquatch. I'm just not. I don't think the ones that we have anyway are dangerous apes. They're certainly big enough they can hurt you if they want to.
Right.
Yeah, but it never bothered me. Out of all the times I was outside taking photos at night, taking star photos, I never felt threatened. The only time I ever felt nervous, like I mentioned, is when I smelled that one. I couldn't see it, so night blind. I did not want to see it. I didn't want to shine my flashlight around and see some 8-foot-tall big thing stare back at me. So I didn't. Yeah. But it didn't hurt me then either, so who knows? I think that people should use caution in the woods when they're looking for these things.
Right,
but I wouldn't be too afraid of it.
Right. I would be very careful if I was going into their territory, like I said before. If you're on your territory, I think they're going to mostly just be curious, and they're opportunistic. They'll take some feed or whatever if they can. But for the most part, I think that you're right. Up in the north, I think they avoid people or they watch people some, and there's a lot of cases of them playing with children, the juveniles. There's one case down in Australia. There was one case where this girl, she played with a juvenile Sasquatch on a regular basis, and she was telling her mom about it, and her mom wouldn't believe her. And until she ended up later down the road seeing one of the adults standing in the woods watching the juvenile.
I got barking dogs again.
That's all right. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on today and telling your story and sharing that. If it's really a very fascinating site that you have there and your experiences. So just be careful and don't put yourself out into their areas without being very cautious, because like you said, sometimes you might not be running into the one that you know of that's around all the time, because they do seem to migrate.
Well, that's true. And then just one more story real quick. Pam was horseback riding at a plantation in South Carolina, and she started finding tree bends. But then she said she started to hear things, and she got real nervous. The horse got nervous. And the same thing, we're not in our home territory. We don't know if Sasquatch are all the same. Maybe there are human-like ones, but there are also going to be some dangerous ones. Just like you have dangerous people, you're going to have dangerous Sasquatch. And the ape-like ones might be a different breed entirely. So she got out of there quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to be cautious.
And and plus, if you're going out there into their territory, if they have their babies around, they're going to be protective, just like a bear. A bear will pretty much run from you most of the time, unless it's protecting its young.
Yeah, it's not. We have a cat down here in Florida that just had kittens, and if a dog gets too close to the kittens, the cat will attack it.
Right.
The cat flips out. Any mother's going to do that, and there's no reason to think a Sasquatch is going to be any different.
Right. Yeah. And just like people, there's crazy people, and there might be some crazy Bigfoot, But thank you for sharing today, and stay in contact. And if you have any pictures of some of the things you mentioned, if you would email them to me, and I'll put them in as you're speaking, and stay in touch. If you come up with any more,
I will.
If you run across any evidence.
Actually, I'm also, besides being a photographer, I'm also a writer. And I was writing a blog. It was supposed to be about building an off-grid house in New York. And then I started writing about our Sasquatch. And I took the blog and our evidence, I turned it into a book. It's kind of an introduction to Sasquatch for beginners like I was. And it's called Living Among Sasquatch, a primer. And it's on Amazon. It's on Lulu. So if anybody wants to see the photographs for themselves, they can do it there. They can look at the book. I've got a public Sasquatch photo folder on Facebook. If you can find me on Facebook, you can look at the photos that I've got. Come blow them up. They're in color on Facebook. You can look at them there. And I'll be sure to email you the photos that I've got so you can see them for yourself.
Okay. And send any links for anything you want to show, and I'll put them in the description, and so they can easily go to whatever you're talking about right there.
Yeah. Oh, also on YouTube, you can find me on YouTube. Search for Sasquatch. There goes the dog again. Sasquatch vocalization, and my name, Dave Gibson, and you can listen to that coyote call. What the saying is, Sasquatch imitating a coyote. You can listen to that for yourself, and just watch the reaction of the dogs when you look at it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And any links that you send me, I'll put them in the description, and then of course anyone can search for what you just mentioned there. So keep my email. If you run across anything else interesting, give me a holler, and I'll have you back on. Is that okay?
All right, I'll be sure to do that. I said if I was going back to New York this year, I'm sure I'd have more to share. Down here in Florida, we don't have anywhere near the activity that we've got up. Well, we have found a few things, but nothing like up in New York.
Right.
But Pamela might get back up in New York. We're having an expedition on our property in the fall. She's going to try to get up there for that. We've got some really experienced people that show up for that. So I'll be sure to share that with you too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye. All right, YouTube land. I hope you enjoyed that. Go check out the guy's stuff, and if he sends any pictures, I certainly will put them in this episode, and I will see you all in the next video. If anyone out there has a story that they want to share, any kind of encounter with Bigfoot, Dogman, or any type of interesting story that's in the mystery genre, you can email me at brentonson@gmail.com. And until next time, be blessed, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.